You're listening to The Final Frequency, Cold Frequency, the case of Elara Voss. We are 13 days in. I want to start by thanking everyone who reached out after last week's broadcast. The volume of messages I received in the 48 hours after it aired was, I won't pretend otherwise, overwhelming. Some of it was expected. People who knew Elara. People who had their own questions about the Calloway Industrial Estate. People who simply wanted to say that they were listening and that they believed someone should be asking these questions. Some of it was less expected. I received 2 messages from addresses I could not trace that told me, in varying degrees of directness, to stop broadcasting about this case. One of them was specific enough about certain details of my daily routine that I found it advisable to change some of those routines. I am telling you this not to alarm you, but because transparency is the only tool I have, and I intend to keep using it. Someone does not want this case discussed on air. That tells me more about this case than anything else I have found this week. I am still here, the microphone is still on, and tonight I have something significant to share with you. Something that required me to sit with it for 4 days before I felt I understood it well enough to bring it to this broadcast. F came back. We met. She told me things that I have been turning over ever since. Things that connect the pieces from last week in a way that I did not see coming. And one of those things is about Elara directly. About what Elara knew and when she knew it. This is Cold Frequency, and this is The Thread. Before I get to F, I want to account for what last week's broadcast changed, because it changed several things, and you deserve to know all of them. The police issued a public appeal on Friday, 4 days after my broadcast, 13 days after Elara disappeared. The appeal featured a photograph, a good one, recent, clearly Elara, and asked for anyone with information about her movements to come forward. I want to be precise about what the appeal did and did not ask for. It asked for information about her movements on Thursday, April, the day she disappeared. It specified the period between 9 in the morning and 6 in the evening. It listed her last known location as the convenience store, where she was caught on camera at 6 p.m. It did not mention the Calloway Industrial Estate. It did not ask for anyone who was near the estate in the early hours of Friday morning to come forward. It did not reference the CCTV footage that shows her walking purposefully down an industrial access road at 2:47 a.m. The police have that footage. I know they do, because Elara's friend confirmed the detective had it as of last week. And yet the public appeal, which exists to generate witness testimony, made no mention of the location where Elara was last actually seen. I want you to sit with that. A public appeal for a missing person that deliberately excludes the location of her last confirmed sighting. That is not an oversight. That is a choice. Someone decided the Calloway estate should not be in that appeal. I also heard from the detective assigned to this case. Not in response to my appeal for contact. I want to be clear about that. The detective called me on Thursday evening. The conversation was brief and professional, and I am going to describe it accurately. The detective told me that my broadcast had complicated an active investigation, that the dissemination of certain details, specifically the CCTV footage and the location, could prejudice the inquiry, that I should consider the impact of broadcasting unverified information on the family and friends of a missing person. The detective did not tell me anything about the investigation, did not confirm or deny any of the facts I had reported, did not ask for my source for the CCTV footage, did not acknowledge that the footage existed, did not once use the word Calloway. I told the detective I would continue to report what I could verify. The detective said they hoped I would consider carefully what I was doing, and then they ended the call. I have considered it carefully. I am still here. Before F, I want to share 3 accounts from people who responded to last week's broadcast. Because the investigation belongs to everyone listening, and what these people found matters. The first came from a man I'll call W. He works, or worked, as a security contractor. He told me he had been employed at the Calloway Industrial Estate approximately 18 months ago. A short contract. Routine security work, he was told. Monitoring the perimeter of a decommissioned facility while a private environmental survey was conducted. He said 2 things that I have not been able to stop thinking about. The first, the environmental survey he was told about was not what was actually happening on site. He said he saw equipment being moved into the facility, not out of it, into it. Heavy equipment, the kind that requires specialist operators. He was told not to ask questions about the internal operations. He asked 1 question. He was removed from the contract the following day. The second thing. He said when he drove past the estate 3 months ago, not for any professional reason, just passing, the lights were on. Internal lights, visible through high windows on the western face of the building. A facility that has been publicly listed as non-operational for 2 years, with the lights on. The second account came from a journalist, a former colleague of Elara's at a magazine she worked at briefly 4 years ago. I'll call her A. A said that approximately a month before Elara disappeared, she had asked A something. A seemingly casual question slipped into a phone conversation about something else. She asked, "Do you know anything about shell company structures in the logistics sector?" A said she didn't and moved on. The conversation continued about other things. She hadn't thought about it again until she heard last week's broadcast. Shell company structures in the logistics sector. The Calloway Industrial Estate, as I noted last week, is owned through a chain of transferred assets that ends at a company with no public-facing presence. A company in the logistics sector. Elara was asking about that structure a month before she disappeared. She was already pulling the thread. The third account is shorter. It came from someone who asked to remain completely anonymous. No initial, no identifier. They said only this. They had been inside the Calloway estate within the last 6 months. They said they could not say more. They said the estate is not what it is listed as. And then they did not contact me again. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they saw. But 3 separate people, a security contractor, a journalist, and an anonymous source, have now independently described the Calloway Industrial Estate as something other than an abandoned facility. That is not coincidence. F contacted me on Monday, 4 days after last week's broadcast. She did not use the email address I had publicized. She used a method of contact that I am not going to describe here because I want to protect both of us. Her message was short. It gave a location and a time. It said, "Come alone. Don't bring a phone." I left my phone at the studio. I went alone. The location was a cafe on the western edge of the city. Open, public, busy enough that a conversation could happen without being conspicuous. F was already there when I arrived. She had chosen a corner table with sightlines to both entrances. She was nursing a coffee she had clearly not been drinking. She looked like someone who had not slept well in several days. She looked like someone who was scared and had come anyway. I respect that more than I know how to say. We spoke for 41 minutes. I took notes on paper. I have those notes in front of me now. I'm going to share what she told me in the order she told it to me. Because the order matters. Because the way the picture built across those 41 minutes is part of the story. F works in planning records at the City Council. She has worked there for 9 years. She is meticulous, She is experienced, and she has, in her own words, never flagged anything in 9 years that she was not completely certain about. 2 years ago, she noticed a discrepancy in the Calloway Industrial Estate records. The estate was listed as decommissioned in the Public Planning Register. Standard process. A site ceases operation, the relevant forms are filed, the listing is updated. Routine. What was not routine was a secondary filing. A document that should have been publicly accessible under planning transparency regulations, but had been misfiled. Deliberately misfiled, F believes, in a category that made it effectively invisible to standard searches. The document related to a change of use application. The estate had been approved for continued industrial use under a new ownership structure. The application had been processed internally, approved internally, never publicly advertised in the way planning law requires. F flagged this, internally, to her supervisor. Her supervisor told her the matter had been reviewed at a senior level and that no further action was required. When she asked what review had taken place, she was told it was not information she needed for her role. She dropped it. For 18 months, she dropped it. And then 3 weeks ago, someone came to see her at work. A woman, 30s, professional. Asked to look at the planning records for the Calloway estate under a standard public access request. F said she recognized immediately that this woman had found the same discrepancies she had found. She could tell by which documents she asked for, by the sequence of her requests, by the very specific question she asked at the end, a question that showed she had already mapped the ownership chain and was looking for the document that confirmed what the estate was actually being used for. F said, "I nearly told her everything right there, in the office, with other people around. I nearly just said, 'I've been looking at this too. You found what I found.' She didn't. She was scared. She answered the questions professionally, and the woman left. F said she went home that evening and looked up the woman's name from the access request form. It was Elara Voss. 3 weeks ago, 1 week before she disappeared, Elara Voss sat across from F in a council planning office and asked the exact questions that told F she had found the thread. And F said nothing. She told me this across a table in a quiet cafe with her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. And her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. And I understood completely what it costs to carry that. The knowledge that you had the chance to say something to someone who is now missing, and you chose not to. I told her, "You couldn't have known." She said, "I know. It doesn't help. It doesn't help." F spent the months after her supervisor shut her down continuing to look, carefully, slowly, in ways that wouldn't draw attention. What she found, and she shared documents with me that I have since had partially verified by a source with relevant expertise, is this. The Calloway Industrial Estate was transferred 2 years ago to a company called Verant Logistics Solutions. Verant has no public website, no listed directors in the standard registries, and a registered address that corresponds to a serviced office building with no permanent staff. Verant Logistics Solutions holds a contract, a government contract. Specifically, and F was precise about this, a contract with a division of the Home Office that handles what is described in the contract documentation only as material logistics for sensitive asset management. Material logistics for sensitive asset management. That phrase means nothing on its face. It is designed to mean nothing on its face. Government contracts use language precisely to obscure rather than illuminate the nature of an arrangement. But F had found something else. A secondary document, the one that had been misfiled, that referenced the contract in slightly more specific terms. It described the Calloway facility as a staging and processing location for materials classified under Schedule 7 of the relevant act. Schedule 7. I spent 2 days trying to find out what Schedule 7 covers in the relevant legislation. It is not publicly documented in the standard way. What I was able to establish, through a source I am not going to identify, is that Schedule 7 relates to materials and activities deemed sensitive enough to be exempt from standard public disclosure requirements. An estate that is officially closed, owned by a shell company, holding a government contract for something classified, and a journalist who found all of this 1 week before she walked down the access road at 2:47 in the morning. I don't know what is in that building. I don't know what Elara found when she got there. I don't know if she got inside or whether she was stopped before she did. But I know she found the thread. And I know she kept pulling. And I know she has not come home. I want to tell you what happened after the meeting with F. We left separately, different times, different directions, standard precaution. I walked back toward the center of the city, and I thought about everything she had told me, and I tried to organize it into something I could present to you clearly and without speculation. I was approximately 8 minutes from the studio when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I have been more careful about unknown numbers since the messages I received after last week's broadcast. I answered. Male voice. I did not recognize it. He spoke quietly, not a whisper exactly, but the voice of someone who was aware of their surroundings as they spoke. He said, "You spoke to F today." I did not confirm or deny. I asked who was speaking. He said that didn't matter. He said what mattered was that I understood something before I broadcast again. I asked what I needed to understand. He said, Elara Voss was a good journalist, one of the best I've encountered, and she was right about the estate. She found what she was looking for. I asked him what she found. He said, that's the question you need to answer, and I'd encourage you to answer it carefully. And the line went dead. I stood on the pavement for approximately 4 minutes, not moving, just standing there with a dead phone in my hand, processing what had just happened. Someone knew I had met with F. Someone knew Elara had been right. Someone was telling me to be careful, and I could not determine whether that was a warning given in my interest or a threat delivered politely. She was right about the estate. She found what she was looking for. Elara, what did you find? What did you walk toward at 2:47 in the morning that you had been looking for long enough to ask about shell companies a month before you disappeared? I don't have the answer yet, but I am closer than I was last week, and I am going to keep going until I find it. Here is where we are, 13 days since Elara Voss disappeared. The Calloway Industrial Estate is not what it is listed as. It holds a classified government contract. A security contractor saw equipment being moved into it 18 months ago and was removed when he asked questions. The internal lights were on 3 months ago. Elara was investigating it for at least a month before she disappeared. She visited the planning office 1 week before she vanished and asked exactly the right questions. And someone with knowledge of all of this called me tonight to tell me she found what she was looking for. She found it. Whatever it is, she found it. I want to ask for something specific from you tonight. If you work in government contracting, if you have knowledge of Schedule 7 classifications, or of Verant Logistics Solutions, or of any contract relating to the Calloway Industrial Estate, I need to hear from you. You do not need to identify yourself. You do not need to give me more than you are comfortable giving. But if you know something, and you have been sitting with it, now is the time. Elara sat with information for a month before she went to that estate alone in the middle of the night. I understand the instinct to verify, to be certain, to have everything confirmed before you speak. I am asking you not to wait as long as she did. F is safe. I checked in with her this evening. She is careful and she is scared, and she came to that cafe anyway, and I am grateful for every word she shared with me. I will not put her at further risk by revealing anything more about her situation. But I want to say, F, if you are listening, what you did took courage. Elara deserved someone like you in her corner. I'm sorry it took this long for the two of you to find each other, even if it was too late. The investigation continues. Next week, I will bring you what I have found about Verant Logistics Solutions, who is behind it, who benefits from it, and what a Schedule 7 classification actually means in practice for the people living near the facility it covers. And I will tell you what I find when I go to the Calloway estate myself. Because I am going. Not at 2:47 in the morning. Not alone. With precautions that Elara, working alone on a story she hadn't yet shared, may not have been able to take. But I am going. This is Cold Frequency. Point 6. I hope someone is feeding you.